Hey everybody, welcome to my session on multisensory intonation. My name is Blake Morgan. I'm coming to you today from the UK, and behind me is a picture of Scotland, the Glenfinnan Viaduct. If anybody out there is a Harry Potter nerd, you'll know that many of those scenes are set in Scotland, and that's where I'm based currently, and Edinburgh is the city that I'm based in. It's a beautiful place to live, as you can see, and if you are a Harry Potter nerd or an Outlander nerd, and any of those Scottish films, you'll know that there's a profound beauty really to Scotland, and I think that it has a massive impact on the music that's made over here. Currently, I sing with a group called Voces 8, and we're actually based in London, but all of us live all over the place in the UK. But before Voces 8, I sung with some groups in the US and professional ensembles, including Chanticleer. I think you may have heard from Andy Van Allsburg earlier in the day, who is a member of Chanticleer currently, and also Contus and Conspirare. So three ensembles that I would highly recommend you check out if you haven't heard of them yet. They're incredible groups. And actually, I have a little bit of a wacky accent because I grew up in Michigan. I studied jazz voice and classical music at Western Michigan University, and actually sang in Gold Company with the person I think that's hosting this meeting, Eric Jacobson. We were in fact mic partners. So the two of us got to share a microphone, being the two tenor ones in Gold Company, under the direction of Steve Zagri at the time. Now it's directed by Greg Jasperis, both of whom are complete jazz legends at this point. If you ever get a chance to hear Gold Company or sing with Gold Company, especially, I definitely recommend it. They're an incredible group of musicians, and I think that's really where we earned our stripes as musicians in the beginning. So, awesome group there. So for me, Michigan has a really special place in my heart, and it's great to be with you all today, to join you digitally. And in fact, I'm also pre-recording this lecture as well, this little workshop, because we're in a recording session at this moment. So right now, I'm not live because I'm currently singing a premiere of a new work that was written for the group Voces 8 by a Swedish composer named Morten Jensen. Sometimes these sessions pop up last minute, in the midst of this pandemic. So just one that we had to take. But I will join you live in just a few minutes after I get through this little intonation bit. So if you have any questions, please just write them down. It could be really anything about life on the road. Maybe they're just music questions, choral questions, tuning questions, really anything. Just feel free to write those down, and we will get to them at the very end. Maybe 10, 20 minutes we can devote to that when I join you live after this. So today, I really want to jump into this concept of multisensory intonation, the way that intonation impacts us, not only in an oral sense, but also physical and emotional sense as well, because I think it is really multisensory. I think that intonation and temperament of the way that things are tuned, the way that things are balanced, all that kind of things, it really impacts us all, whether we're educators or therapists, especially therapists. We talk about the impact it has on the brain. Or teachers or performers, it doesn't really matter. I think it's a conversation we should always be having. Intonation is truly paramount. I'm sure you have experiences of when things are out of tune, how unsettling that can be. Maybe you have a friend who's, I don't want to say pitch deaf or tone deaf, because I don't think that actually exists. I think that most people can learn how to sing and learn how to tune, but some people are more pitch inclined than others maybe. And we have those friends, maybe if there's one note that's being played and you ask them to sing this one here, maybe they're like, just right in between the cracks. And that's a very sort of disturbing feeling at times. So it can have a profound impact on us in a bad way, like if we're watching maybe a horror movie or something like that, and all of a sudden you know that someone's about to jump out behind the corner, and there's a glissando in the strings, and slowly the intonation starts pulling apart in chromatics, and you get these really dissonant clusters of things that aren't quite in tune. And that can have an impact on us. But also, when things are in tune, it can have a really a beautiful impact and a healthy impact on us as people, as human beings, and the way that we think about music. And I think that some of my favorite experiences have been the calming music that sometimes is played, when you're getting a massage or something like that, or listening to barbershop tags when they're super in tune. There's a certain energy that brings. So to simply play a little bit of what that can sound like, I've just got some barbershop tags here. One of them is the end of a piece called Chord Buster's March. This is the Vagrants singing it. And I want you to listen especially for some extra notes that start appearing when things are so locked in tune that we get some extra tones happening. So here's the end of this tune, which is called a tag. It sounds like this. So there's actually no one singing that super high note, that one that's way up there, way higher than I should ever be singing. And that's because they also aren't singing that high. It's just an overtone that's appearing, and we'll talk about overtones in just a second. But I'll give you one more listen to that, so just your ears can become familiar with that whistly like quality that's on top there. Listen for that high tone. So when things are really truly locked in, we get some extra notes that appear, some phantom magic tones. And that's really what we're going for at all times when we sing a cappella music, especially a cappella music. So I just think that intonation is really important, and it has so many impacts on us as people. And in Vault to Say, we had a little conversation about how much time we spend in rehearsal on intonation. And answers kind of ranged from somewhere between 60% of rehearsal we talk about chords to 85%. I mean, granted, in Vault to Say, we prepare all the music in advance, so there's no one that turns up to the rehearsals, whether someone's playing our pitches and spoon feeding us anything, but we're expected to basically have the music already prepared, to walk into the room, and then we focus on the literal fine tuning, and that often involves pitch, really shifting, finding these places that these pitches live that's maybe not always the same notes as the piano. So what does that exactly mean? Well, we have tremendous pitch capability as singers. We have one of the most complex, versatile, and expressive instruments, of course, everybody says that. But we also have tremendous pitch capability. We're not a fretted instrument, so we don't have keys or frets. We're not tethered to the pitches on the piano. If we want to sing between da and da, we can find that place. Da. It's neither of those notes, right? It's right in between. So we can slide between those notes, and it's an incredible ability that we have, I think, as non-fretted instruments, to move between the notes. This concept of between the notes is kind of a tricky one. I'm sure some of you have heard of equal temperament, but if not, equal temperament is the system that this keyboard is tuned in. You can't see it because Scotland's currently covering it up, but there is a keyboard here, I promise. That's what's making these cool noises. But this is an awesome system. The octave is divided up into 12 equal tones. That's actually not the way that sound resonates in the world around us. It's not the way that music was ever intended really to be, or the way that music naturally rings in the world around us. Basically, this equal tempered system split it up into 12 individual notes, the octave. And it's a wonderfully well-tempered system, and it's basically characterized most of our Western music for hundreds of years. But like I said, it's not at all in tune with the way that vibrations naturally resonate in the physical world around us or within us. So there's this thing called the Harmonic Series. And I'm going to bring up a slide in just a second about what that exactly is. But it's basically physics, math, electricity, astrology, music, even rhythm, and the way that vibrations naturally occur in nature. It's the natural music of our universe, essentially. So what happens is, if someone were to sing this low C, for instance, and if someone were to sing that note, there's extra notes that are appearing that characterize that sound. It contains within it all these extra shades of baby notes. They fit into that sound, and they make it sound like a human voice. So I'm gonna share my screen with you really quickly so you can see what the Harmonic Series looks like. Just gonna share here. Hopefully you guys can see this. So this is the Harmonic Series here, and if we just zoom in a little bit, you'll see there's the C once again, this C that I was singing. And above that we have an octave which naturally occurs. And then we get the fifth, another octave, a third, fifth, that G there, seventh, octave, second. It just keeps on going into infinity, and the intervals get smaller and smaller. And it's just a beautiful thing that all of these notes characterize that bottom one. So if someone is singing that C, you get all of those notes, and that's what makes it sound like a voice. And if a violin or a cello was playing that low note, a violin can't play it low. A cello, it can though. You would get a different shades of those notes, but they'd all be there. They'd all be present, characterizing that low sound. We can develop scale from looking at this harmonic series here. So we can use this series to break down individual intervals. And the funny thing is, the intervals in the harmonic series are not quite the same as the ones in the piano. Just to give you an example of what harmonics sound like, I'm going to play a polyphonic overtone singer named Anna Maria Hefele. And she has the ability to overtone sing, and that basically sounds like this. Maybe you've tried that before. If you want to join in with me, you can actually try it right now. Just using the American R, making that American R sound. So just try that with me. Maybe we'll use this pitch here. And then just change the embouchure ever so slightly with your mouth, making different vowels. So. And what's happening is I'm actually getting these individual notes. If you look at the chart here, the harmonic series chart, you can hear all those little baby notes are happening. But some people can do it and really accentuate their harmonics, and they can also change the bottom note and actually basically polyphonic overtone sing. So here's an example of someone doing that. This is Anna Maria Hefele. Pretty insane stuff. And one day we can all keep practicing and maybe be as good as her, but I doubt it. I will certainly keep practicing. But it's just an incredible sound. And what those notes are, those are the natural notes. I play that to show that these notes are always present. We're accentuating them, and we overtone sing like that. But it's an incredible thing. And the thing is, they're slightly different than the notes that are on the piano, because we talked about that that equal tempered system that the piano is tuned to, and so many instruments are tuned to. But that's not the way that sound is naturally meant to ring. So just as an example, I just have another little clip of me overtone singing, and I'm just going to play along with the overtones that are occurring, just to highlight them ever so slightly. So here we go. So take a listen especially to the seventh, that note right there. It should be right here on the keyboard. That note. And I'm just listen to what happens. There's going to be a little bit of a beating, a dissonance that happens, because it's not quite the same note as the piano that is happening up high. Let's see if I can isolate that sound here, just by looping it. You hear there's that rub that's just a little bit different. That's because that note is quite a lot lower. The harmonic that is very a natural sound is a lot lower than the one that's on the piano. If we look at this chart, we can see that the harmonic, that seventh, occurs right here, and it's minus 31 cents lower than the one on the piano. If we use the natural harmonics. So that's quite a long way down to the next note. If anybody out there has ever heard of cents before, I think this term is sort of a little bit misused in the choral world. We say like, if someone's singing a really flat note, they're like, da. The director might say, tenors, that's about 2 cents low for my money. Why don't you just raise it a little bit? When in actuality, they're probably about 50 cents low, because cents is a system that is used. There's 100 cents in each semitone. So if I went da, 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 there's 100 cents between those notes. You can think of it like $1, for instance. And if I was 2 cents, that's an incredibly small amount. It's 2 cents of the way down to the next note. So if I was here, da, I wanted to go down 100 cents, I'd be singing this note. And then I'm back to this note. If I wanted to go down 50 cents, it might sound like just a little bit lower, right in between the cracks, halfway between them. But something that's minus 31 cents, well, that's about a third of the way down to the next note. But that's quite a different note than is on the piano. So It's just something to think about when we try to pitch off of the way that sound naturally rings. But something to take away, I think, is that the piano is not at all in tune, really. If there's one thing you take away from this little chat, it's that fact, is that the way that we tune when we sing is going to be different than the way that we tune on the piano. And that's just kind of a natural thing. We trust our bodies and we trust the way that sound rings within us and around us, and that's okay. And that's really the way that things should sound, I think, in the end. I'll just stay on this one for a little bit longer, because really what happens in voce is that Johnny, our bass, he's the low singer. If he was making this low C, we have this pyramid of sound, and he has to be kind of the foundation, right? But the other thing is that he creates these sounds and these overtones that everyone else just kind of fits in with and surfs on top of that. So, let's say that I was singing this third here, which is going to be negative 14 cents lower than the piano, that E there. So if Johnny is blasting out this low C, then I just sing, up there. Just because he was singing that note would mean that actually my note is already there. All I have to do is just fit in with it. And I might choose a note, like I said, that's negative 14 cents lower than the one on the piano. So that might be, if I'm going, you might be hearing that's a little bit different than the one that I might choose to sing. And then as we move further up, I mean, the sopranos in the group are just completely surfing on the overtones that are created by the lower voices in the ensemble. So that's what we're really aiming for. It's a physical sensation, and sometimes you have to actually trust your body and not your ears. Just to kind of see what that sounds like, some of these just triads. I've run my voice through a program called Melodyne, which is I'd call it like a pitch tailoring software. It's not quite the same as auto-tune, but it allows you to tune to the scent. We mentioned this system of cents before, but it allows me to put in, if I wanted to tune my voice to 5 cents higher, a very, very small amount, I could tune it up 5 cents or even 31 cents, like we talked about that seventh. I can lower it 31 cents. So this is what a just fifth sounds like. Now, just, when I say the word just, that means it's harmonically tuned. It's tuned to the overtone series and the way that sound naturally occurs. So there's this just system, and there's the equal tempered system that the piano is tuned to. So first of all, here's that just harmonic fifth, the fundament of the harmonic series. Let's see what that sounds like. So that sounds great, but let's see what an equal tempered fifth sounds like. Pretty much sounds the same, right? Because that's just 2 cents different. If we look at this chart here and we zoom in on our fifth, the first fifth that occurs, that G following the low C there, we see that it's 2 cents higher using the ratio 2:3. Okay, so that's the ratio that we're going to use to create that fifth, and that's just going to be 2 cents higher. It's a very, very tiny amount. That's 2 cents of the way to the next note. So most ears can't really tell the difference between 2 cents of adjusting, but you might be able to feel it. So I'm just going to play them back to back. And what I want you to listen for, or sort of kind of get your body ready for, is a sense of phasing that happens. This looping in and out. That's just wow kind of effect that happens. So the first one is going to be that pure, just intonation. The second one is going to be the equal tempered system that the piano is tuned to. I'll just play them back to back. When I go like this, it'll be 1. When I do this, it'll be 2. Ready? Here we go. And equal temperament. And just. So it's completely pure, beatless. And we get a little bit of... And that's because the waves aren't fitting exactly in with one another. They're just kind of beating in and out just a little bit. They're not totally lined up and looping in with themselves. As we go further in, it becomes a little bit easier to sense when something is equally tempered versus justly tempered, especially as we get to this third that I mentioned earlier. As we get this E natural, for instance, if we were singing a C, this E natural would appear in the harmonic series, and that's just a little bit lower than the one on the piano, 14 cents. So here's what that sounds like in a triad. And here's what it sounds like with the equal tempered version, the one that's tuned to the piano. And I think now the phasing becomes even more apparent. And there's nothing I've done to my voice. It's completely just there's no plugins or effects on it at all. It's just besides that Melodyne tuning program. But you might hear like a phaser, like a that's happening, and that's just because the waves aren't completely lining up with one another. So I'll just play them back to back again. Here's number one, the pure intonation, and number two, the equal temperament. So number one and number two. So maybe now you can start to sense that slight difference, and that's just caused because of that 14 cents that that's already there. I mean, the bottom note, when you go ba, there should already be that natural third of ba that's happening there. And if you choose not to sing the third that's occurring already from singing that low note, you get a beating effect that happens. So it's really fascinating stuff. If we wanted to go a little bit further into this seventh that I mentioned, this 31 cent seventh, is quite a big difference. This is what that sounds like if you put in that seventh, you know, this chord here, barbershop, right? Jazz. If we put that in and justly tune all of those notes the way they're meant to be tuned, the way that they ring naturally, it sounds like this. So that's pretty pure and beatless. And if I played that now with the equal tempered version, the piano tuned version, it sounds like this. So just back to back, those sound like this. So this is the justly tuned one. Pure, beatless harmony, and then equal tempered. And that's just a matter of changing just a little bit of percentage, just a few cents flatter on some of those intervals. But it also could be sharper. I mean, like I said, this fifth should just be a little bit higher than the one on the piano. So it's an incredible thing, the way that we choose to tune these notes. Let's go a little bit further in here. So we can build the scale. I mentioned this earlier. We can build the scale and actually figure out a way to use what's called 5-limit intonation, 5-limit just intonation. But there are problems with it because as you move further into this, you can shift. Some of you out there that are maybe math geeks, which I love thinking about numbers and things like that, you might be a step ahead of me here thinking, well, if I decide to tune something, you know, if I decide to pitch a third, you know, like really low or something, and then I move to the 3 chord, you know, which do I pick the same note, that same third, or do I pick do I automatically change the root? And that's just what has to happen, is things have to shift around quite a bit when we do tune to the way that sound naturally resonates. Things move in a really beautiful way, but because it's totally natural. But let's just see what happens. We'll look at figure A here, tuning from the root. So this is just going to be everything in root position. We're going to listen to the basses, and they're going to be at 0 cents, no adjustment, but everything on top of that we'll just slot into them. So that sounds like this. So that sounds beautiful, but the problem is that this alto part here, so the alto is creating those wonderful, nice low thirds in the first chord. They've got this F major, they're the third in that, and they're syncing it nice and low. But in the next chord, they become the 5th, right? Because we go to the minor chord, D minor, and then they suddenly become the A in that chord, the 5th of that chord. And so they have to raise, and that's a 16 cent adjustment. So if the alto didn't want to go, you know, in the middle of that phrase, they might say, okay, well, I want to sing the same note across both those bars. Everyone should adjust to me. So then everyone will have to shift down a little bit. And what happens when the altos stick to their guns on that note is this. And suddenly we've wound up 22 cents lower than we began. If you listen to the beginning and the end. pretty unsettling when you think about it. And I think that's just kind of what can happen is things can detune ever so slightly. If you're just following your instincts and slotting in, if you want to sing a beautiful, then the next chord you might have to go down, really raise that nice and high. And that just, there's little micro adjustments we have to do to ring chords in their truest, purest, most just form, if that makes sense. What's amazing is that this system really works best in early music when we have really constant occurring triads. We can really tune, to make pure triads. But in jazz, I really wouldn't recommend it because most of that music, most of modern jazz music, was built off of the keyboard. And whenever we have keyboards playing with us, we should always try as much as possible to tune to that instrument. It could be in a different system than equal temperament. Sometimes we have, mean tone instruments and really advanced things, different tuning systems. Especially when we play with sort of ancient music groups in Voce 8, lots of groups that specialize in Bach or Handel, particular instruments that would be played during that time. They have different tuning systems that were being used during that time. So if you think back to it, not everyone would had this nice equal tempered keyboard back in the day. And so a lot of music was built off the way that things were naturally tuned, which is what we're talking about here. But just to have a little example of what jazz harmony sounds like when you decide to justly tune some of the intervals, I'll just play a version of Girl from Ipanema here. And I'll play along with the melody as well, so you can hear how much it shifts. Here's a little analysis if you want to follow along. What's happened is I've sort of stolen the note from each chord, so each chord inverts so that there's a common tone across the notes. And that's just because I've always had it so the chord's inverted, so you can always see which note is shared and which one is going to be the pivot point, the anchor between the notes, between the chords. It sounds like this. Not the most pleasant thing to listen to. I certainly wouldn't want to listen to that if I was sitting in the dentist office waiting to get my teeth pulled or something like that. That would put me on edge even more than sitting at the dentist waiting to get my teeth pulled, I think. So yeah, I think that just if you're singing any sort of music built off of the keyboard, stick with equal temperament. Don't try to tune just intervals, unless you get a nice a cappella moment, which we'll talk about for the piece that we'll be looking at in just a second. The piece that you'll be recording in just a few minutes, actually. One more little example, which I want to actually have a moment to sing with you all. This is a little progression that I really love doing with choirs, and I just want you to listen to the top part here. Listen for this soprano line. You can sing it in either octave, but just for now, just listen to it. It sounds like this. So if you noticed, that top part is pivoting quite a bit in order to match the harmony, the overtones that are created underneath. If we look at that first chord, E minor, right? Not with a added 11th. We have this nice high minor third. As we move to that A7 chord, we have to sync it to make sure that it's a just 7. So it goes from something that's like really nice and low. If you don't believe me, take a listen to what that part was doing there. I'm just gonna play the very top part. So we have this nice high third, very low 7th, low third, and just a slightly raised fifth. And that's really fitting in with what's being created from the pyramid of sound underneath it. The overtones underneath are sort of buoying it on to allow that sound to surf and just fit in. It sounds very, very odd by itself. But when you put it together, its ringing is very pure, it's very beatless. So it's a pretty cool thing, and I'd love to give you a chance to sing along with this. So if you're just sitting at home, either octave is fine. Starting ba or ba there is fine as well. Just sing along with the exercise and see if you can just sync those intervals and raise those intervals to fit in with what's being created underneath. Here we go. Ready? And... So minor thirds are quite bright. Lift that up. And then sinking to the seventh, really low seventh. Nice comfy low major third. And then a slightly bright fifth. And you're happy if you want to screenshot this little exercise or something, or just transcribe it like Mozart or something. You're welcome to do that and share it with your choir and try it out at some point. Besides the awkward parallel fifths, it's a really fun exercise to do, and we do it quite a bit in Voce 8. Just a little tuning game that we like to play to really fit in with the natural intervals we're trying to create at all times. So I think I've talked enough about intonation things, but I'd love to get into some balance things, which is kind of what we'll be looking at for your piece today. I'm just going to stop this share and bring up If Music Be the Food of Love, which I actually sung my freshman year of college. I'm just going to share this. Here we are. So the first thing I want to look at in this one is just some of the a cappella bits, because we have a wonderful little moment to shine and implement some of these things. Obviously, when the piano's playing, we can only do so much. We can talk about balance of chords, but we don't really get to talk about the way to slot them in and tune them in interesting ways. But just as a little example, let's look at this chord on sing in bar 5, 6, 7. This one right here, where the altos get this nice rub. Those wonderful altos that were sticking to their guns earlier and causing the entire group to sink. Now we get a moment to shine here. So we have this F minor chord. And the added note here is in the alto. In the word sing, you have the ninth. And it's really important to, I had this just a second ago. I had the vertical analysis, the harmonic analysis of the chords. It's always really important to know what's happening underneath you so that you can better inform yourself how to tune that note, or where to balance that pitch. In this case, we have a little rub in the alto part. So the chord is really happening in the bass, tenor, and soprano, our F minor, right? We have root, fifth, and third. But this alto note gets this, the beautiful little color. So because it's a color, we need to make sure that it's just kind of shimmering rather than one that's like really belted out, which just would dominate the texture a bit too much. So these moments, I think the sort of integral part of the chord has to win. If it's a battle between and this, the minor third has to win, because it's more important to the building blocks of that chord, right? Another moment to think about as we get into the a cappella section. Let's look at page 6. So this is one of my favorite chords on tongue here. And the cool thing about it is it's actually not in root position. We have this, let's see, we're in this key now, so. And your tongue. And here's the chord spelled from the top down, or from the bottom up we go. Beautiful ninth chord. And what's cool about it is, like I said, it's not in root position. It's actually this chord but it's spelled with a third in the bass. The basses have the third, tenors have the tonic, altos have that ninth, and sopranos on the fifth. And so what we have to do in this one is make sure that those triadic parts, the building blocks, are really ringing before we add in, once again, the altos with the spice, right? And also, we need to make sure that the root is the most prominent thing, so people hear that E flat really ringing, right? We want to hear that, a little bit of fifth, tuck that third in, and then just sprinkle the color, the ninth, on top. We get another one of these in the next page. What is this? This is on the word U. A nice crescendo into the forte U. And this one's a little bit different because it's similar with the basses are once again on the third. Tenors have the ninth this time. Altos are there, and then we get this wonderful color in the top, the major seventh. And you could call this a rootless voicing, which is really cool because the root's actually not there. There's no E flat, but it's implied that it's here, right? And the reason that we can call it that is because if you look at the piano part, we get this cheeky little E flat happening right here. Even though the chord is really, it has a G in the bass, we still get this happening because the piano's playing that. So I think this one, you need to make sure that that the audience perceives E flatness about the chord, right? Even though we have this third, ninth, fifth, and major seventh, beautiful color on top. Make sure the G natural is very prominent in that chord. As we move further on, let's look at bar 39. If you're following along in your own score, bar 39 here. On the word pleasures, invade both. We're looking at the second half, the vade and both. This is great a moment because we have this, we're definitely in E flat here. It's very Lydian kind of, you know, bit of Zelda there. But when we get this chord, the bass stays the same, and underneath, on top, we have. You definitely could look at this chord like sort of a poly chord sort of thing, where you have F on top and then E flat on the bottom. That's one way to think about it. But really, when we invert the chord on the next note on the word both, to me this functions more as an F dominant kind of chord. So what I hear is, and we do have that F happening across both those chords. So I would tune it, I would balance it like an F dominant chord, where, and if we look at the word both, the most important note is in the sopranos. They have the tonic, that F. Then we put in our fifth, making sure that fifth is ringing. Third gives us the quality of the chord, it's major. And then we put in that flat seven. And if you wanted to be, this is a cappella, if you wanted to tune that seventh, negative 31 cents. If you wanted to do something, basses, for instance, you could do something like pleasures really nice and high, pleasures invade, pleasures invade. You could sync it just a little bit low, something what we might do, a very advanced technique in voce. We would do that kind of thing. But it's a very small amount, so you go like pleasures invade, something down there, just a little bit of beating that might occur for that moment. Definitely not down to that note. But if we wanted to balance it as a dominant chord, we could go just sync it a little bit low. Another great chord on the word ear following that. He really loves these voicings. This is a very typical voicing in a lot of this, and a lot of modern music, as we have, once again, that third in the bass, the most important note, B flat in the tenor. So really the chord is, we have the third in the bass, tenor on the tonic, ninth once again in the altos, that bit of spice, and then the fifth in the soprano. So once again, the same sort of inversion. Things get a little bit trickier on the next page, actually. We get the shimmery dissonances on the word wound in between the tenors and the basses. I spoke about this concept about winning earlier, you know, which pitch has to win, what do you call the chord, and what are the most important prominent notes that should come out. In this one, for instance, we've got this high F way up there in the soprano. There's our tonic of the chord. Tenors have the third eventually when they get to their wound, and the basses are on the C, the ninth. So really the chord is here, but the basses are singing the ninth. So if I were a bass, I wouldn't blast that note. I'd keep it as a nice color. So I'd want to hear B flat, and then a nice little color. I wouldn't go wound. No one wants to hear you blasting that. So, and the same thing happens to the next chord. We just move it down a whole tone on the next word, wound, right here. Same voicing, exact same position. So once again, basses, just lighten up a little bit on that note. One last moment. We'll end it with this and go to a little bit of a Q&A with the word on charms. What a beautiful moment. This is page 10, right here. So this, I think, is really a fun chord, because we're now kind of in the realm of D flat here, right? The best key, if we're honest, you know. And we get this voicing that's like this. So the basses are on the tonic, which is great. Gives us our nice overtones all popping up. And then we have this added 6 in the tenors, our third in the altos, and then a ninth. Now it's really difficult to write 4-part voicings because sometimes you have to just kind of cut your losses and leave out some notes. But if I were adding in some voices here, I might choose to voice it like, or something like that. Maybe like that. But we have a lot of space between these notes, and it's really important that the basses give us a nice fundament here, really allowing those overtones to ring. Because really, if they're singing a proper tonic, D flat, you get all the, like we talked about the overtone series, you get that fifth happening, and that third way up there. And in fact, if I wanted to overtone sing that, you can hear those little baby notes, right? So the thirds and fifths are already present. We luckily have the altos giving us a third. They have that F. But we don't need the fifth. We can completely remove that because the bass is providing it, kind of. Tenors are a nice color. They're that 6. And then sopranos, just nice, with that ninth, just shimmering on top. And really, the ear perceives this. It's a charming chord, isn't it? That's really one of my favorite moments. So I think, guys, now I've talked for long enough and played enough examples of barbershop. I'd love to meet some of you, and I'll just transfer over now to our call. But it's been great playing some things. I can't wait to hear some questions. So if you've written them down, let's get to it. See you in a second.